AM 1310, this is WDOD, Chattanooga. Well, I think we've got a very interesting program for you today. We're going to be talking with a close friend of mine, someone that you've probably seen at one time or the other. I know that you knew her husband, Mrs. Helen Thornton. We'll be back with our guest here in just a minute. 12:25, and this is Viewpoint. We want to welcome to our microphones this afternoon, Mrs. T, as she was commonly known. Who gave you that name?
A daughter of a close friend of mine. She had an aunt whose name was Helen, and she couldn't understand why there would be two Helens. So she ended up calling me Ms. T, and I've had that name for about 40 years now.
That's what everybody calls you.
Right.
I go up and down Rossville Boulevard. I visit with people like Johnny Zuinas down at the Tear Don. He says, yes, Mrs. T, I know her. Her friend Ed Rogers down at the Butcher Block. Yeah, Mrs. T. Nobody calls her Helen, just Mrs. T. Well, it's good to have you with us this afternoon.
Thank you, Earl. I'm sure I'll enjoy it. I always did. I'm just that much of a ham.
You are a ham, aren't you?
I can't help it. I was born that way.
Oh, me. Of course, Mrs. Helen Thornton. She is the widow of Harry Thornton. Everybody knew Harry Thornton.
Well, at one time, someone said that he was better known than the mayor of the city of Chattanooga because he had more to say than the mayor did at the time.
Did he really have a running feud going with Bill Castile, or was that just an act?
No, you know, Earl, that Harry never, whatever he did or said, it was the truth. He admired Bill, but there was just some little something that their personalities kind of clashed. I think Bill felt the same way about Harry. They both admired each other for the work that they did. As Bill told him one time, he said, I could never sit there and talk on my feet. And he said, I'm sitting right everything. Harry said, yeah, because you can look it up.
Oh, me. When did Harry Thornton get started in broadcasting?
He started in high school, probably in junior high, if I knew that far back. I'm not sure just exactly when, because that's all I ever heard from the day I met him till he died. He ate, lived, slept, everything, radio and TV.
Did he ever tell you why he wanted to get into broadcasting?
No, he just had always loved it, and he used to go around with anything he could find in his hand that looked like it was a microphone. His mother said most of the time it was a vase of some kind, talking into the whatever thing that would look like a microphone. And he was actually he was self-made as far as his speech and his English and so forth. He thought there was no excuse for anyone on the air to make mistakes in their speech. Mm-hmm. Good English was a must.
What year did he graduate from Central High School?
38, I believe it. Yeah, 38.
1938. Now,
right.
You had not met him prior to 1938.
No, I met him in 43.
But during the late 30s, he hung around WDOD. Is that right?
All through high school. As soon as he'd get out of school, he'd run just as hard as he could go to WDOD's radio station. Mm-hmm. And he'd stay there. He even got his lessons there. And anything they wanted to do, if somebody wanted something, he'd run get it for them. He was, as you know, what they used to call the gophers.
Mm-hmm. Coffee, donuts, and things like that.
He stayed there until the close up. And after he'd been there hanging around a year or so, they let him sign off one night. And he said that was the happiest day of his life.
Do you have any of his old radio shows on tape?
Oh, yeah.
Do you?
I've got the old... the big reel tapes. Mm-hmm, I've got a big box of those. I've got a few cassettes, but most of them are all the big old tapes, radio.
How did you meet Harry Thornton?
Blind date. I had 2 blind dates in my life, and Harry was one of them, and I married him.
Was he the second one?
Yeah, he was the second one.
Who was the first one?
It was a boy that had... I had a date with another boy, and I always went with Army people because my father was Army, and that was all I knew. I was what was known as a Army brat. And so this boy had drawn duty that night, so he called me and asked me if I'd date his new roommate that had come in, and that was it. It was a new date, and it lasted about 30 minutes. I didn't like him at all. But... and Harry was also a blind date.
Did he call you and ask?
No, it was very similar circumstances. My sister had a date with one of the soldiers out there, a first lieutenant, and so I had been out of town, and I came back, and she told Bill that her sister was in town. He said, "Oh, good. So we got some new officers that have just come in from Des Moines." So she said, "Well, good. Get her a date." So he got me a date with what turned out to be our best friend. Matter of fact, they were in our wedding and we were in theirs. But the Bill that was dating my sister was notoriously late. He was always late. I never would even advise anyone to start getting dressed until he was due there, because he'd still be an hour from time. But anyway, when he finally got there, I said, "I'm not going all the way out the post." He came out after us. We were going to the post, which was about 27 miles from our house, because we lived out in Decatur. So anyway, he called the barracks, the officers' quarters where he was staying, to see if Bert was there. And Bert had already gone to bed. He gave him up. So here he was OD that night, officer of the day. And he said, "Well, yeah, bring her on out." Said, "I'd sit and talk to her, so we can't go anywhere." And so each one of us had 2 dates after that, because we already had the dates set up. Then after that, we never dated anyone else.
What'd you talk about?
Oh, gosh, Earl, that was 45 years ago. I can't remember. Probably music. We danced a lot.
Harry was a big lover of the big band.
Oh, yes. He was a marvelous dancer, and I was too at the time. I can't dance a lick right now, I don't think. It's been so long. But just the topics of the day and different people that we knew there at the post. So, just...
This was about, what, 1941?
No, this was 43.
43. So the war was...
Oh, yes. He was at Norman, Oklahoma. What post is that? I've forgotten the name of it.
I don't remember now.
But anyway, he was there at the post, just about ready to finish out his year's draft and be able to come home. It wasn't a draft. He knew he was going to be drafted, so he jumped up and joined so he could get in the infantry. And then when the war broke out, that ended any of them getting out.
Mm-hmm.
So he applied for officers training course school and made it, and went to Des Moines to school there, and graduated there. And his first assignment was Fort Mac, and I met him about 2 weeks after he got there.
How long did you date before you got married?
About a year and a half.
Was it an enjoyable courtship?
Wonderful. Oh, yes, I've got just reels and reels of movies of our courtship. Harry was he was a Don Juan. He was just a very lovable person. He's extremely courteous. Even up until the week before he died, I was never allowed to open the door for myself. If I dropped anything, I just stood there, because he was somewhere around, he'd pick it up. He was just that kind. There was no excuse for a man not to be a gentleman.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a gentleman all the way.
Now, after getting out of the military, well, did Harry ever serve, did he ever go overseas during the war?
Oh, yes, he was in Japan.
So you were separated then
right.
for a few years.
Yeah, fortunately, it wasn't so long. He left for overseas about July of 45, I believe it was, and got back in January of 46.
Mm-hmm.
So actually he was only gone about 6 months, because the war ended about the time he got over there.
Now, he's from the Chattanooga area, and you were from Decatur.
Well, I lived in Decatur at the time.
Did you have a difficult time in deciding where you were going to settle down after he got out of the Army?
Oh, no. No one ever, at the time we grew up, matter of fact, we had it agreed upon before we married. He had 51% of the business, and I had 49. If we couldn't settle anything with talking, then he settled it with his 2% interest.
Oh, boy. And I could hear Harry Thornton in my mind saying, "Now, Helen, I love you, honey, but this is the way it's going to be."
And that's exactly right.
And I can see him right now in my mind, as he chats with you. So you decided that you would come back to Chattanooga.
Oh, yes, that was home to him. And a girl never considered. She gave up her church, her family, and her home, and went with the man. When she got married, she gave it all up and went with him. And
when you came back to Chattanooga, he got a job in broadcasting naturally.
Well, he had the job before he came back. We came in. The WAGC had just gone on the air when he got to Atlanta, and we had reservations at a place in Lake Wales, Florida, to go fishing for a whole month. And so we got down there. He came by and talked to Van Campbell, who was AGC's manager, and he told him where we were going. Well, on the way down to Florida, he stopped in Dalton because he had first worked, his first paying job on radio was in Dalton, Georgia, at the only radio station they had there. So he stopped to see them because it'd been so long since he'd been around. So they offered him a job, but he said give him a chance to make up his mind. He was going to Florida for a rest. And we got down to Florida, got all set up in our cabin, and fished for an hour or so. And the next morning he needed a haircut, he said, and we needed a few groceries, so we drove into town, and we'd told Van and the family, anybody, because there was no phones at the fishing camp. And he told them all that just to send it general delivery there at the little town and at Lake Wales, and that was a small town then, it's a big town now. And so while he was in the barbershop, I go to the post office or the television, I'm trying to think of telegram.
Oh, yeah, Western Union.
Western Union. And so there was a telegram from Van. Please come home immediately. Need you on the air.
Okay.
So I go and hand it to him in the barbershop. So we got one full day of our month's fishing trip. We had to go back to the camp and close up and come back to Chattanooga. And so he started work the next day. That was around the 4th or 5th of February of 1946.
Now, prior to working at WAGC, Harry Thornton had worked at WDEF, right?
Well, he opened up WDEF when they went on the air, before he went in the service. See, he had to leave DEF to go in the service. See, he was there, I don't know how long, whatever year they opened up, until, early 40, I believe, or late 40, I guess it was.
So he worked primarily in broadcasting all of his life.
That's the only job he had. Well, now, during high school, for spending money, he worked at one of these mills around here that makes the little ceramic electrical things of some kind. I don't know the name of it, but he worked out there after school sometimes for spending money, because his father was dead, and it was the Depression. Kids didn't have money to spend.
How did he get interested in wrestling?
In wrestling? Doing the broadcasting. When they first, well, not the broadcasting either, it was first doing the PA system. Because, the people that wanted things like that, they went around and tried to get the most popular radio announcer in town. Because, you see, there was just the, 3 radio stations in town at that time. But I believe there were 3. And AGC was one of them. And Nick asked if Harry would come and do the PA system.
Nick Goulas.
That was in 46, I believe it was. Somewhere along the latter.
So that was just sort of a little sideline.
Yeah.
Something he did for pleasure.
Right. It just, for a little extra money, because, back then radio didn't pay a whole lot.
It still doesn't. But we're not talking
I don't mind that. He started out to work for $45 a week. and was so proud of it. And I had more money to spend then than I had when he finished up, to be honest about it.
My guest, ladies and gentlemen, is Mrs. T, Mrs. Helen Thornton, Mrs. Harry Thornton, and we invite you to call if you've got a question for Mrs. Thornton or like to reminisce a little bit, 266-1310. We'll be right back. My guest is Mrs. Helen Thornton, better known to all of us as Mrs. T. Hello, you're on the air.
Yes, I'd like to ask Mrs. T, how did you feel about Harry's participation in professional wrestling, and did he really think that it was real? He seemed to give that impression that he really felt like it was real, and I always felt Harry was such an honest person that I didn't understand his attitude on that.
It was real at the time Harry said it was. And that is as far as I'm going to go with it, because I think that it's possible that I shouldn't say too much more than that.
Okay, sir. All right. Reminiscent of the old days.
Right.
Hello, you're on the air.
I wanted to find out if Miss T remembers the recipes for her fried pies and the curried fruit recipe.
Right offhand, no. I possibly could but if you'll just, I can't. Well, I'd hate to go into a whole long recitation right now on recipes. I'm sorry. I guess I had 500 letters that I hadn't answered at Harry's death, and it was a year and a half before I knew where I was, and I finally just threw them all away because at that time I could not stand the thoughts of trying to do it.
Okay.
Okay. Did you ever try any of her recipes?
No, those were the two that I particularly wanted when she was giving them out.
Uh-huh.
And I collect recipes, and they've just always stuck with me that I'd still like to have them.
Well, I'm terribly sorry that you didn't get them, but
I understood.
You've got my curiosity up now. I love to eat, you know.
Well, I do. I am a collector of recipes, and I have gotten some great recipes on some of my travels lately. But but I will be glad to look those up and send them to you.
Well, you want me to send a self-addressed stamped envelope again?
It doesn't matter. You just write me, and I'll be glad to mail. I'll just mail them to you.
Well,
thank you for calling.
I'm sorry you didn't get them.
Well, the desire for them just lingered all these years. And,
well, you're sure.
And when I heard you were going to be on today, I said, I think this is the first time I've ever called a talk show.
Well, I'm glad you did. And you just send me a note and tell me what you want, and I'll be glad to look them up. It'll take me a while because I stay so terribly busy.
Well, don't we all?
Yes. Well, that's the only way you can keep going these days.
Yes.
Thanks for calling.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
15 minutes now before the hour of 1 o'clock. Hello, you're on the air with Mrs. T.
Hello, world.
Hello.
I would like to say hello and greetings to Mrs. T.
Thank you, and same
And
to
I
you.
would like to say a few things about Harry Thornton.
Okay.
First place, Harry, he was a real man. You either liked him a lot or you didn't like him much at all. There was very little middle ground with him.
There was no middle ground.
That's the way he was. That's my.
But you've got to point out.
He was a member of the Maricala division.
I still have his patches too.
Now.
I still have his patches.
Yeah, Maricala division. Those
Right.
were the ones that were poised to invade and combat Japan. But the bombs were dropped, so they're part of the occupational force, praise the Lord. that many soldiers didn't get killed. But Harry, he made his points clear. And one other thing I would like to say, Mrs. T, this may bring a little tear to your eye because I got some tears in my eye about it. I remember when we had the morning show on television. One other thing, do you remember the Morning Milkman?
Oh, yes.
Was that AGC?
Uh-huh.
I remember that when I was a little kid. Got so much pleasure out of it.
Yeah, he opened, that was his first program. Well, he actually was the Moonlight Melody Man before he became the Milkman.
When I was a kid, they wouldn't let me stay up that late. Made me get up early, so. And one other thing I would like to say, and then I'll release the phone to someone else, like to make some complimentary remarks about Harry Thornton. As when he was on the morning show with TV show with Judy Corn was co-host then, and at that time you were very sick, and she looked at him and said, "Harry, what would you do without her?" He said, I don't even want to think about it.
Thank you.
Thanks for calling. Bye-bye. Hello, you're live on WDOD with Mrs. T.
Hello, Dr. Earl.
Hi, Bobby.
Oh, maybe I'd call and tell Mrs. T she really sounds great. And
Thank you.
I'm enjoying the reminiscing of everything. And Dr. Harry was one of my buddies. I used to call him a lot. And
Is this not Sarge, is it?
No, this is Bobby Peoples, the blind fellow.
Oh, yes, Bobby. I remember you coming down
Right,
to the
I was down there with
station.
you all the time.
Right, I remembered it.
But it's sure good to hear you again, and you sound great.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and it's nice of you to call.
Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hello, you're on the air.
Hello, Miss T.
Hi.
I remember old Harry when we were in ROTC, and he was one of the big shots, and I was a buck private in the rear ranks,
Well,
marching down Dodge Avenue with a band.
it was the Army. It was his pride.
ROTC at Central.
Right.
They
Any,
even had the band go ahead of us. We thought we were something.
oh, yes.
We got our uniforms for $2 a semester, else I wouldn't have had clothes enough to go to school.
Well, that's why he went into it.
I bet he never did take you to Graceland, did he?
No, I just went just a few weeks, about a month ago,
He
though.
didn't care much for Elvis.
He admired Elvis, but he didn't care for that type of music.
No,
He was a Frank Sinatra, a big band, those kind.
I remember when he was the milkman, and that was an age that, what's his name sitting there through the glass won't remember because he was just a little tack.
Now, I do, Porter. I do remember Harry in his early days on WAGC. Just the fact that he was on the radio. But I don't remember anything, he said or any of the records he played.
When they lived out there where the Brainerd Airport was?
Yeah, on Montview Drive.
Yeah, that used to be the airport.
Right.
And Harry Thornton was a fixture around Chattanooga. And
he was a phenomenon.
Yeah, one time old Gene Murr was on, when he used to be on early, Harry'd come in, and I think the first anniversary of Elvis' death, and he was playing one of Elvis's fine numbers, God Bless America or something. Anyway, I called in. I said, I just passed Harry on the freeway, and he was standing by his truck with his hand over his heart, standing at attention. And Gene Murr told him when he came in. I called Gene next morning. He said Harry didn't like that too.
Harry did not have a dislike for Elvis.
I know it. It was a respect, but he didn't like that kind of music.
No, but towards the end of Elvis's life, his music was a lot better. He quit singing that rock and roll kind.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what Harry did not like. It was the rock and roll music.
Good to have you on.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for calling. We'll be right back. Hello, you're live on WDOD with Mrs. T.
Hello, Helen?
Yes.
I was coming down the road
Ann.
and I heard you, and I was just thrilled to death to hear your voice.
And this is Ann from Tiftonia.
It sure is. I hadn't talked to you in a while, and I just want you to know how thrilled I was that
Where have you been, Ann?
And your post office box is 508.
That's right.
Oh, okay, you'll be hearing from him, and it's sure good to hear you.
Thank you, Ann. It's
Ann,
good.
where have you been? I've not heard from you in a long time either.
I don't do any calling mostly.
Well, now,
But I listen to you every day.
You used to call?
I know, and I want you to know this. Every time I go in the Lookout Valley drugstore here, you're on up there. I just want you to know that.
You're one of our favorite people.
I'm glad you say that.
And then we miss you when you don't call.
And, Helen, I just want you to know that you'll be hearing from me.
Well, thank you, Ann. And you were one of our favorite people.
I just want you to know, excuse me, I'm getting choked up just talking with you. You and Harry, I guess I admire you more than anybody that I know of, Helen.
Thank you, Ann.
We listen to you at Watch You rather every morning, and I think you know that.
Well, I appreciate it.
And
Yes,
thanks for saying the things you did, Earl. And if I was up on Hicks and Pike right now instead of in Tiftonia, I would be at this place you're talking about.
Oh, it is great.
I got to get up there. But it's good talking with you here.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hello, you're on the air with Mrs. T.
Hey, I wonder if he could tell us a little about Bush and also how Judy's doing.
Judy?
Don't tell anything personal. I'd just like to know how they are. I used to watch Bush, and kept up with him when he was in, in school wrestling and also the other part.
Well, Judy is still living in the same place in up on North Chattanooga somewhere. I don't know just exactly where she lives, but she's still there. It's been a month and a half to 2 months since I've talked with her, but she's doing fine and is happy, and her children are growing up and doing fine. And Butch is just great. He's in Nashville and doing real well.
Well, thank you very much. Hey, Miss Thornton?
Yes.
You know when Joe's house burned down there?
Oh, yes, Joe.
I done the wiring on that, to get it back.
Yeah.
And I passed your house, most every day.
Yeah, Joe Rich's house next door to us.
Yes,
yeah. And I must say that now, after all these years, we are having our first grandbaby.
Oh, boy, I know you on the high.
Yes, because, I have wanted a grandbaby for years and years and years, and we have one coming in September.
Oh, boy, now I know you're going to celebrate then.
Oh, yes.
We'll have to take her to Peoples.
Yeah. Well, it's nice talking to you.
Thank you.
I never have met you personally, but I feel like I know you. And so I'll let you get on with other things.
Thank you for calling.
Bye-bye. Hello, you're on the air with Mrs. T.
Mrs.T.
Yes, sir.
Wife and I, we always enjoyed Harry on TV in this program. But we was wondering the other day, whatever happened to Judy Corn that used to be on there with you?
She's still here in town, and I don't know the name of the insurance company she's with, but she's doing real well. She wins a big trip every year, so she must be selling an awful lot of it.
Oh, uh-huh.
It's a cancer insurance of some
She's not in radio no more.
No,
Well,
uh-uh.
okay, thank you.
Sure, you're welcome. Thanks for calling.